Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. On this fairly warm afternoon in the middle of winter here in California. I think it's about 70 today. And my frickin' lighter died. Alright, be right back. So today's episode is about a mental coup. What I want to talk about is that flash moment in your life when you contemplate having an emotion, a thought, a belief, paradigm switch, upgrade, change, whatever, that you've never had before. And you get that really odd feeling. The naughty feeling. The naughty feeling that you're not supposed to have these thoughts. Right? That's what you think. Oh, geez, man, I was raised a certain way. We're supposed to do what we're told. We're supposed to go with the flow. There are laws that tell me how to behave and how to think. There's schools that define what is smart and what is dumb. As of probably the last, 15 years, what is conspiracy that you can believe and what is conspiracy that you can't believe? Pretty much that anything that makes your government look bad are the ones you're not supposed to believe, and the ones that make your friends your enemies, those are usually the ones that are actually true. But we talk about waking up all the time and rebuilding the bottom of the pyramid all the time on this particular show. Well, it doesn't take a genius to realize that that's going to take a lot of change. A lot of paradigm shifts, right? So I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to talk about how you get to that point where you feel totally comfortable. Because if we really think about it, it's a spectrum of thought process, right? Spectrums are, diagrams from left to right. There's a left extreme and a right extreme, and then there's obviously some balance in the middle. So what are the extremes? Let's figure out where this pendulum swings, right? On the left, let's just say, and you're gonna have to forget the political alignments here. Maybe I should just say on one side. I'd like to give you visuals. So on the left, you have someone who doesn't feel comfortable thinking any thoughts that are different than what they are told to think. Their parents, their government, all that stuff. And then you have someone completely on the right side of the spectrum who cannot allow in anyone else's thoughts but their own, and for whatever reason they have to be counterintuitive to everyone else's thinking, regardless, just as a matter of principle, right? Now, what's interesting about these two extremes right away is that the person on the left, if they ever met someone completely on the right, again, this is not a political party alignment thing, they're going to think that person's crazy. I mean, literally like dangerously crazy. On the right, for the person who is thinking completely, atypical thoughts, completely against the grain of all things, they're going to look to the left and think how pathetic the left is, that they can't muster a single thought process that isn't something handed down for them. Now, this spectrum is really important because in the end of this episode, you're going to have to think about, and you can start thinking about it right now, where are you in that swing of thought process? Are you way off to the left where you're only going to believe what you're told by other people? Are you way off to the right where you're sort of an anarchist in your own mind, only willing to think something that's taboo, chaotic, crazy? So this episode's going to be about figuring out where there is a decent balance, because I'm not sure what the right balance is. I actually don't know. There's this whole thing right now in December of 2016 about fake news. What's really, really funny is you have a bunch of people who have been trained to talk to you like you're complete morons. And they're the people running around saying that people that talk normal are, disingenuous and deceptors when they don't talk like we do. Anyone who listens to Wolf Blitzer talk for 2 seconds should realize you're in a fantasy land of complete bullshit. No one talks like that. And there's no reason why a news organization should start talking to you like that. They are complete facades on reality. There to completely capitulate down to military, corporatism, government. I mean, we all know there's good people in these organizations. But I'm telling you, if you're on camera, the likelihood that you're in command of what you say is negligible, right? You know, they need to hear this episode more than anyone, right? But people need status and they need fame, and they'll take it however they can get it. And sadly, it's typically at the cost of their integrity, their own self-control, their own self-identity. I mean, imagine you're a nobody. Like you're a Barack Obama, you're a Barry, whatever the fuck his name was, and you're a fucking nobody. You've never accomplished anything. No one remembers you in college. You're just a whiny little bitch who talks about everyone being racist against you. And someone walks up to you and says, how'd you like to be the president? Or a senator first and then a president. And you're sitting there going, well, you know, my whole life's shit. Sure, man. Sure, I'll be famous. Whatever. That's really what I want in the first place is some status, some status achieved in the public eye, forcing my fame down the throat of those who won't accept me in my own eye because I've been taught to be a communist by my father. You don't want to be that guy. I used to be a couple degrees away from a pretty famous CNN reporter. And so I got to see the circle of people around this person and see how they, undulated and, got wet to this person's presence. The people around them didn't ask questions because they wanted to be by someone who was famous on television. So, it's funny. I see these tag-alongs and I think, well, isn't it interesting? They have two choices. They can say, wow, that I now know one of these fake news people. One of these people who are just a fake human being that they don't write any of their own stories. They just read teleprompters and look pretty on television. And I have the option. I can acknowledge that, which I know to be true, or I can shut up and be next to a famous person and tell all my friends, well, I know this famous reporter on CNN, blah, blah, blah. I know a famous rock star. I know a famous, singer, whatever. So why make this episode? To what end am I getting to here? Well, I think that the world is in a revolutionary mindset right now. And I do not mean a physical revolution. And, there's a lot of us out here making these recordings, and of course, we know that in an extreme case, there could be a government body that wants to shut you down. And so they could, if they wanted to, cite something that you say and say that you're trying to incite a revolution, and they could come handcuff you at 4 o'clock in the morning and haul you off. And so there's a lot of perception that everyone's pussing out, and when we talk about revolution, we always have to extend the disclaimer. We're not talking about guns and bullets. I'm not cowering down from that notion, but I don't see that being necessary in the slightest. I've never known really that kind of stuff to really benefit a people. I mean, look what happened in Cuba in 1959. Even one of Castro's most staunch supporters said, look, we got raked over the coals because they said we didn't bring what we promised. And he goes, all we promised was a revolution. We didn't promise any results. And the guy, after reviewing the facts and talking to all these different people that were a part of his invasion teams, it seems to be 100% true. So these physical revolutions, unfortunately, they are led by a very few people. And it's usually based on hysterics. It's usually based on a razor-thin layer of any sort of dissidence and well-thought-out plans. And because it's like that, you have the majority of the country that is involved in this, or the group that's involved in this, sort of grabbing the tail of the person in front of them instead of thinking for themselves. And so that's why I think that physical revolutions are sort of bullshit. It happens every once in a while. The American Revolution, there's one reason why that 27-year war was so intense. Because you had a whole collection of countries in Europe that had been under the monarch tyranny of all the royal families, and they were sick and tired of this shit. But you had a collective consciousness. You had a whole group of people saying, if I could just get on that boat and survive that boat trip to the coast, then my chances of living the life I really want to live has gone up drastically. And even if I die going over there, or if I die there, I won't be dying here in the motherland that has not been known to be prideful. It's been known to be a suffering place. Imagine this, right? All these Americans who grow up in America, like me, and were raised here, and we think about someone coming and taking it away, and we get all militant. We're like, man, I'll kill you, blah, blah, blah. Well, now imagine being in Europe during the pre-revolution era, just a few hundred years before the real revolution here in the Americas, before we were actually designated as America, probably 1600s, 1700s, and you're over there, and your homeland has never been anything but a prison. There's no national pride. You don't like your king and queen. You don't like the world that you live in. You don't like the federale sort of, military that can come in and sleep with your wife and then take up a home in your house, right? That's why we have the Third Amendment of the Constitution, which says, stay the fuck out of my house. When the Boston bombing happened and these groups were looking for their two patsies, started pushing through neighborhood homes. It was a violation of several things, but it was definitely a violation of the Third Amendment. And they even left these houses unlocked. So these SWAT teams are pushing through homes, and no one has the wherewithal to lock the back door, lock the front door when they leave. And so they left these homes completely exposed to thieves. Just a little test to see if everyone puts up with it. So that's why I think this mental revolution, this mental coup, is the only way you can do it. And the thing is, it happened organically in Europe back in the day. I don't know why it's not happening right now, but it happened back in the day, and it's going to take years of suffering for them to do it again, which is sad. If you're a parent and your kid wants to have a party and they're in their teens, and of course the social media goes out that there's a party and it just happens to be your house and you happen to be the parent, but you never got the notice, but all of a sudden kids start showing up to your house. You know how this goes. If you let everyone walk in the front door that wants to come over, you're going to have a problem with your possessions, with everything, right? Depending on what kind of kid you have. But if you stand at the door as the parent and you look everyone up and down, you ask them who they are, how they know your daughter, how they know your son, and you sort of make decisions, and you tell them what the rules are. Don't touch my shit. You don't go back in this room. The door's closed. You don't walk in. The bathroom's second door to the left. Boom, boom, boom. You're probably going to have a decent experience. But you have to regulate the admission process. The European Union has removed the bouncer from the front door, right? Just come on in. In fact, Merkel's the disgusting communist nerd in Germany who isn't popular with anyone. And her solution to the problem is to invite everyone to hopefully get laid that night, right? It'll be popular on Monday morning. In America, we're standing ground. We're saying no thanks. But that's exactly what Hillary was. Hillary is essentially the American version of a Merkel. A disgusting female. Pardon my political digression here, but she's trying to get herself, in with the Chinese, with the bankers of Europe, who are in her particular club, with the Saudis that she took $150 million from and then granted an $80 billion weapons contract so that they could arm ISIS even further. So what's a mental coup? Well, here's the thing. I just gave you the left idea of that being completely conservative and you only think the thoughts that are told to you. And then on the right side of the spectrum, you're a complete anarchist. You think every single thought that comes into your head that's your thought. And you don't let anyone own your brain, right? right away, we know that the person who thinks only thoughts that are told to them, well, they're probably going to have to lighten up a little bit with that regimen and attempt to have a thought of their own. Now, I will tell you this. Once you have years and years and years and decades of only allowing someone else to tell you what to think, it's nearly impossible. It is nearly impossible to open up your mind and build an appreciation for your own thoughts. One, because it's very alien. It's very scary. And we have to make people feel safe having their own thoughts. Now, even the most conservative person has their own opinion about things, right? It's like assholes. Everyone has them, right? Now, it could be still based on paradigms of, other people telling them what is possible. Like, I have buddies that won't drink anything but light American beer. And you can take them to a brewery with the most amazing concoctions and they won't drink them because it's Coors Light and that's it. There are folks in America that never eat anything other than hot dogs and hamburgers, and it's not a reference to Podesta and his children molestations, but it's ketchup and mustard. That's it. There are no other meals in the world. So some people are pretty thorough about their home training, and it's sort of sad, right? For some folks, it's going to be a lot of witnessing other people for them to understand that maybe what is official isn't quite official. For some folks, they're going to have to see the official stories not pan out. They're going to have the fake news exposed to them. And they may not be able to take on really intense, fake news. They might not be able to take on a conspiracy that weighs a lot. They may not be able to walk up and talk about 9/11 to them. And what's interesting about it is that there's usually some sort of, liar within the town and community that you're raised in, or sort of within I would say 100-mile radius around where you live. There's been a preacher that touched a boy. There's been a drama teacher that touched a girl. There's been the mayor that took off the payoff to build something. Even in my hometown, this woman came in and just took a bunch of payouts and got everyone to sign up to a bunch of construction work that ended up being tens of millions of dollars more than it actually was estimated at. She got kickbacks from the construction companies, all this kind of stuff. So people see these kind of things, right? And those are your moments to kind of get in front of someone's face and shake your hands and go, you see, right? You see there are people who are deceitful, right? It's not that we're not trying to, undermine the trust of mankind, but we just need to know that there's at least half of a single % of people that are really devious. And they don't think in small things. They think in big things. My hometown has probably, 8,000 people, something like that. And one woman came in, joined the city council, and cooed the whole place into construction contracts. We just had refurbished the high school. They tore it all the way down to the ground. Unbelievable. She got the city pool condemned. It was literally a historic pool that had no problems. It just needed its pumps replaced. And even if the concrete that built the pool was aging, which it wasn't, we have 3 gigantic world-class cement companies who are willing to donate all the free cement. But she needed to do the contract the way that her contractors could do it, so they built this shitty pool in place of the high school and built a new high school or a new junior high or new grade school. She got a ton of kickbacks. They bid a pool replacement at $2 million. It was eventually $11 million. Now, for a town of 8,000, $11 million is almost inconceivable, and that's just the pool, not the schools. So they obviously took out gigantic loans, upped the taxes to everybody in the town, and nobody makes any more money in my hometown, right? Hopefully they do, but that's only going to be known in the coming decades. Hopefully Trump can help, right? But she was one person in 8,000. She wasn't from my hometown, and I can't believe that they let her come in and do what she did. But see, they were actually all impressed by her city slicker talk and her city slicker contacts. And she completely screwed them and then left. I mean, she literally left right after it happened, right after she got everyone to sign the dotted lines. It was all committed in. It was like an economic hitman, but she was a woman. And she follow the exact thing that Charlotte Iserby talked about in the deliberate dumbing down of America, which was to push the high schools outside of town, decentralizing the synergy of the town. And then just the pool move was just a way to make the hometown eat $11 million in debt to keep them from being able to be, financially mobile. That was made possible because people couldn't think for themselves. Someone should have gone in and just pointed at that chick and said, that's the devil, not an angel. She's trying to get us to sign up to a bunch of construction work, which we don't need. Yeah, our school's old, but we just completely refurbished it. And these kids think that just because you rebuild the building, somehow the education gets better. And that's the biggest joke in the world. And nobody in the town thinks that removing the pool was a good idea. I tell you, if yours truly ever gets wealthy enough, I'll put that pool right back where it was, built to spec of the original pool. So we need to think thoughts every once in a while that we haven't thought before. Now, some of you might say, well, not me, because I have a good regimen of both official and unique, and I'm going to agree with you 100%. There's usually something new we kind of have to pry our brains away from. But at the same time that, let's say that there's a center point where you're kind of balanced between official story and sort of conspiracy theory or conspiracy fact. And, we are sitting in the center trying to figure out what's the compass. What's this moral compass, perhaps, that allows us to know whether or not we have a good balance or not. I think that the best way for us to look at this is simply to say, you take a thought that's coming through your brain and you think, well, is this for the betterment of mankind? Sort of a do no harm formula, as we always say on this show. By the way, Alex Jones is starting to say that now, which I think is pretty cool. We're hive-minding. It's really good. But we think, okay, what are the belief systems for our society? Well, it's all based on kind of building up society and making sure society is productive and happy, has a destiny instead of just a regiment. Now, some people are, and for those of you who are destiny-based and you want to control all of your thoughts, the next thing I'm about to say might be a little hard to believe. For some of you, it'll be just fine. But there are people who love being told what to do. That is what they like. Because they're kind of content with everything. They don't care. They don't care if they dig a ditch or paint a painting or whatever, or paint a side of a wall. They don't care. They simply enjoy being in their body and accomplishing something. And we have to revere these people. We have to protect them because there's always a bunch of jobs that need to be done. And we can't have everyone trying to be, something outside of that unless we're going to build an army of robots to do all the jobs that we don't want to do. I had a business partner that she was half Russian and half Jewish, and I can't remember what exact Ukrainian world she was from, but she said that she was an attorney. She studied abroad over there in Russia, and she said one of the interesting things she found out was that the Russians, throughout history, for a long period of time, kept sending for a czar from Europe, asking Europe to send a leader to run their country because they simply didn't have the educational system, the kind of secondary education necessary to build, political world leaders. And so Europe was more than happy to send over czars because it also kept Russia within their control. And eventually, obviously, Russia built up its own educational system and started having its own indigenous people be the leaders. But you have a group of folks that really like this leadership model. Now, I have no idea what it's like today, right? I think Putin rules pretty hard, actually. But there's going to be, a group of people in society. This is something we have to look at from a global standpoint for a split second. There's going to be eras where there are races that have great leadership, and that through some unfortunate means or fortunate set of circumstances, they lose that leadership. It is my belief wholeheartedly that the Central Intelligence Agency of the 60s, can't speak for anybody today, but they actively assassinated every black leader in America on purpose. And then they gave testimony, which I have a book in my house that has it. You can get it at Alex Jones' website, I believe. But it's a book of the Senate testimony of the CIA to the Senate about the assassinations of Malcolm X and MLK. They had to admit to the Senate how they were trying to frame MLK for everything you've ever heard him accused of. And what's actually fascinating is if you read the book, you will never believe any conspiracy of MLK sleeping with women, having illegitimate children. But it's really funny how people today believe they know a kid that's illegitimate from him and how he slept around. They immediately go after these individuals to erase them. When asked, who they were going to replace or allowed to fill MLK's shoes, they returned with the name Jesse Jackson. And when the Senate asked them why Jesse Jackson, they said he poses no intellectual threat to our goals. And they were completely correct. Jesse Jackson is a megalomaniacal, narcissistic human being who only cares about his own destiny. He has never, ever really held up the African-American platform in any way, shape, or form. Farrakhan, if anybody, was the guy that did that. But then Farrakhan has been near death 4 or 5 times, right? Al Sharpton is pushed to the front. A complete embarrassment to his community. An ambulance chaser. If you are part of a resistance, or you represent a nation, or a group of people that are part of the resistance, there are individuals that will take you out. And it goes back to that thing that I mention every once in a while that Alex Jones said 10, 15 years ago. He said, I think someone had described it to him like this, and boy, were they right. He said the ruling class work like this. Let's say you're on a Mississippi gambling boat, a steamboat in the Mississippi, and on there's a poker game that's going on, and the guys and gals that are playing the poker game are the ruling class, and they're just having a good time. And you can walk up to them, and you can call them all the names that you want in the world. You can insult their family, whatever, and they won't budge. What would normally make a normal human being stop what they're doing and strangle you or fight you, confront you, they don't move. They're calm and cool because that's how they're raised, right? But if you try to manipulate the game, if you whisper a card in someone's ear that someone else has, you try to mess with the chips on the board, you will be eliminated. And that's how they roll. So let's talk about having some new thoughts. How do you do that? How do you do that? Well, there's a couple ways that I've actually stopped some people in their tracks, and I've said it several times on the show for the first and second season. It's real simple. Anyone who's telling you that the world is wonderful, fantastic, and indeed there are people that are profiting, they're very safe, and everything's great. Their whole family's okay. They may be the hardest person to put a new thought into, but maybe they're not the ones that we rely on for this particular upgrade to mental thought. But a lot of times people will tell me, how much government would never do anything bad for them, and I say, look, in the entire time you've been alive, and it's really fun for people who are 50 years and older, but I say if for the entire time you've been alive, I say what laws or statutes have been passed that improved your life. And I get 2. I get the human rights upgrades in the 60s, desegregation, equal rights for blacks, and then I get seatbelts. That's the other one. But I don't get anything else coming back. I get the more regulations on corporations, which drive up taxes, which kill jobs. I get the NAFTA, which exported a bunch of jobs. Luckily, TPP was destroyed. Schools have become horrible. Common Core is absolute disaster. We have 9/11 taxes on our cell phones, for God's sakes. We're eavesdropped on now like crazy because of 9/11, right? We didn't give up back in World War II, but we give up today in 2 seconds, right? All right. So the government's sort of completely out of control, and it's sort of as if they don't really want any one of us to succeed. And that's why for some of us, Donald Trump is actually, the best thing we've heard in a long time. Now, nobody knows if he's going to make it happen or if he's going to be a shill. We don't know. I like his ego because I think his ego is going to fight the system. If you're not for jobs, I think you're going to be in problem. You're going to be in trouble working for that man. Banning the participation in lobbyism. Ooh, that's awesome, right? But what is the game here in America? I don't know what it's like in Europe. I assume it's very similar. But I can tell you in America it goes like this. If you have all of the basic wants that you want, if you're able to lease a car you can't afford, or you're able to kind of put the possessions you want on credit, or in some cases maybe pay for them entirely, but you got your cable shows, you got your nice TV, you got some amenities in your house, you got a nice car, you're able to eat out every once in a while, wear the kind of clothes that you want, play the video games that you want, you're sort of content, right? And really, honestly, that would be the same thing if we had our country completely perfect. You would have generally the same thing, except hopefully you wouldn't have to take loans, you would just pay for things. Taking a loan is not the end of the world, but paying the interest is the game. That's the horrible part about it. Compound interest. Never taught in school, K through PhD. You realize if you went through college and you got, say, a PhD in chemistry, you wouldn't know about compound interest. They would never teach it to you. I've got friends with business degrees that were never taught compound interest. You just supposedly learn it once you get fucked by it. Isn't that interesting? Well, you'll learn what compound interest is once you get a credit card and you don't pay it off in total. And the more you can't pay it off, the more your payments go up. The more your percentage on your card goes up. I mean, it's just crazy, right? So the reason I mention that is that those hidden truths about your reality are what people who can't think different thoughts actually experience and know. Right? They know these things happen, but they don't have anyone mention it to them. And mentioning it to them is the key. Now here's the other thing. Let's say that you're center to right, and again, this is not political, but you're centered towards the anarchy side. You have more thoughts that you believe are your own certified thoughts, even if they don't originate technically in your brain. The ones that you've brought in, the ones that you accept, you've vetted them with reality, and they're not the typical thought that other folks are having. Now, again, the end game that we're trying to go for is that we're all having a good balance of both sides of the equation. We have to acknowledge reality for what it really is, as stated and recorded, hopefully re-recorded in non-revised history about our reality. And the other side is the daily churn of new events that we have to evaluate on a second-by-second basis, right? Now, the homework is not to go out and, get all excited about disrupting society and making it seem like you're nuts, and they'll retreat even more into their idea of, I'm really glad I don't think like this anarchist thinks. They're going to get themselves in trouble. They're probably not very, appreciated by other people. They probably have very few friends. Some people crap themselves when it comes to that. However, what I have discovered is the following. For those of you who think more of your own original thoughts, you've been through the official, rung of history. That's where you grew up, and somehow you broke free. Whenever you did that, you did that. You typically get in conversations a hell of a lot more than other people because you feel more comfortable in your own skin. You don't shy away from conversations because instead of feeling kind of uneasy about what you have to say and what you're thinking in your mind, you feel very at home and comforted with your thoughts. Regardless of how controversial your thoughts are, you feel good with them. And it gets to a point where you actually walk around in society and you kind of feel like, I can have a conversation with anybody, And you'll start to realize that people are actually starving for conversations with people like you. Starving. Oh my God, I've been having that thought and no one's talking about that thought. It is my hope that these episodes kind of help you guys remember the topics that you know a lot about that you can mention to other people. And it's not important that you ever mention this show. What's important is that you spread your particular interpretation of it around the world. Have you ever noticed in society, in your lifetime, there'll be this funny thing that you and your friend developed, some funny phrase, some funny gesture, whatever it is, and you and your friends start doing it, and you do it for months and months, maybe even a couple years. And then all of a sudden, you see it on television. You see it written into a comedy piece somewhere. And at that moment, you have this revelation. You're like, wait a minute. My friend and I developed that thing, and somehow it spread across the world. I had a few of those in the 80s that was really bizarre, and they were things that you were wondering how on earth, they were so unorthodox and so strange, you're wondering how anyone else came up with the same thought, but it happens. Now, what's important about this is that you will find that all kinds of advancements in thought that you have, ways of boiling things down, like that question. Since you've been alive, what law or statute has been passed in your lifetime by your government that has improved your life, has either protected you physically, have protected your destiny, resulted in more education, more opportunity, more success, a better love life, a better life with your child, a better life with your career, whatever it is. Stabilized your universe so you could get more out of it. And then I'm going to say, not a hell of a lot, right? Not a hell of a lot has happened since you've been alive. We fight the system constantly for that little scrap of happiness. Now, to split it here for a split second. Of course, for those of us who live in America, those of you who live in Europe, we enjoy more prosperity than countries like China, countries like India, countries that are, kids digging in trash piles for a little scrap of food. Now, sometimes the press actually dramatizes up. They'll go to the worst neighborhood in India and film that 1 square mile of absolute abject poverty, and then they broadcast that and they say all of India is like that. So there are a lot of sensationalism articles out there that sensationalized articles out there that do that. But I have friends of mine that are very wealthy. They've traveled the entire world, and they look me in the face several times and say, "You have no idea how free you are in this country." But that shouldn't be the standard, right? We shouldn't look at other, tyrannical governments and other governments where the disparity between the rich and the poor is at an all-time high, and then simply go, well, I guess I'm lucky to be in America and have substandard freedom, to have a Supreme Court that looks down on the Constitution from its corporate bylaws of the United States of America Corporation, trying to judge whether or not my forefathers meant for me to have a gun to protect the freedom of speech, to protect all the other amendments of the Constitution, say the 16th Amendment, right? But the first 10 Bill of Rights are damn near perfect. Yes, we needed to add a few others. There's a news article that went out today, which I think is very exciting. And, who knows what's true anymore. But the idea was this, and an idea can be very, very powerful, right? The article was that the FBI is now investigating the CIA. Now, again, I'll tell you, most people in all these organizations are really good people. There's just a few corrupted people at the tippy top, which makes it actually very easy to find them. And they've been living high on the hog of being in charge and being able to do all these crazy coups, importing metric tons of cocaine and heroin into the United States of America and Europe. Berkeley University estimated this was 15 years ago, they estimated the overall gross income from smuggling in these two drugs at around $4 trillion globally a year. liquid cash, untraceable. What do you think you can do with $4 trillion? You realize that if we had $4 trillion coming into this country in legitimate terms, you could pay off the national debt in 2 years and have, $3 trillion left over? Now, of course, that's a global number, not a United States number, but, what's interesting is that money moves in a circle. And I want to remind you of an interesting thing. It's an old story. And I'm not sure who wrote the story, and I'm not sure exactly what the parable was written for, but, you can make assumptions once you hear it. But a guy comes to a small town. I've told this once before in season 1. He comes up to a hotel owner, and he says, you got any rooms for rent? I want to rent a room for a week. And the guy says, well, it's $50 for a room for a week. This is obviously told in the 1800s. The guy puts his $50 down on the table, and he goes, here's, if you put your money down, I'll give you the key and go take a look. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy. He says, all right. He puts his $50 down. The guy goes up to look at the suite. The hotel owner takes the $50 and runs down the street and pays off a debt to some business he has a debt with. And then that person takes the $50 and pays another debt. And it goes in a big giant circle within 15 minutes as the story's told. And the debt comes back around to the point someone owes him, the hotel owner, $50. And so the $50 comes back and sits right on the table, and he says, here's the $50 I owe you for renting that room. Down comes the guy who's evaluating the room, and he decides not to stay. He doesn't like what he saw, so he takes his $50 and he leaves. But the way that the $50 moved around the town is that it paid off a bunch of debts because it's just a currency, right? It's a monetary unit that moves like water. And everybody in the town paid off their $50 worth of debt with that one guy's money. And because it came back to the hotel guy, he was able to give it to the dude. And everybody satiated several $100s worth of debt with one $50 bill. That's how the economy can work if we don't give away all of our jobs. That's a mental coup of thinking. Think differently so that you can see the bigger picture. So what are some of the thoughts and some of the categories that you can think about? So that you can find, okay, what categories of thought could you think a mental coup about? Again, it's not really about taking over any one particular job in the government, although I think we've had a coup in America recently. Hopefully a good one. But I think that we need to start thinking about the standards of living. How much education does every human being deserve? Well, I would say as much as you want. You should be able to learn anything that anyone else knows, and you should be able to go beyond that, right? So you've learned everything about a particular science that's available, and you want more, and so you go get more. You personally go get more. That's one thing that should happen, right? If you invent a product, you should be able to borrow money, build your product, and profit from it. Pay off the original loan, maybe with a little bit of interest, but a fixed interest. Perhaps they just get a dividend on what you share. The profit margins are, right? Now, unfortunately, we have a level of entitlement in this world that is really getting in the way of building a fair system. Fair, as I always say on this show, is perceived in this world as unfair. What do I mean? Well, people will say life isn't fair. And you ask them, well, why are you saying that? Why do you think life isn't fair? They say, well, I'm supposed to have a bunch of stuff. I should be able to get whatever I want in this world. And when you start looking at that, you sit there and you go, well, it is fair. You can get, again, in a lot of ways it's fair. Anything can happen. We built this world, not God. In terms of the policies that we live by, God built the whole thing, and central consciousness or a biblical God, doesn't matter what you believe. Something holds this whole thing together. The math that holds the universe together is at a minimum what we would call a creator. But that creator isn't megalomaniacal, isn't narcissistic, isn't a control freak, and therefore he or she allows us to do whatever we want to do with this world. We built all the suffering that we experience. We built all the pleasure that we have available to ourselves. It is up to us to figure this thing out. It really is. And it's through these new thoughts that we can have that will help us re-engineer the world to be a little more systematic, a little more reliable. We have perceptions of debt. It's just a perception. Because we don't have the balls to have a mental coup against debt. We agree to a mathematical concept in our mind to create debt, to create compound interest. We elect in our brain for someone to have more power over us than we have over them. That's just a mental cowarding down. You know, we always talk about how the world is built on a pyramid and that there's someone at the tippy top. And what's really insane about the idea of people denying that reality is that the official story of how the world works is a pyramid. Right? Those people who are part of the 99% movement, you know, the 1% movement, however you look at it, they were protesting the fact that very few people in the world have all the wealth in the world. Okay, well, that's a pyramid. It's a pyramid right in front of your face. But if you talk about, you know, new world orders and all that kind of stuff and a small cabal of people that run the world, you'll have these folks that are cowards deny that that's the facts. I've got very close friends of mine who grew up very wealthy who at times have argued with me that there isn't any cabal of people at the top. You're just, you know, you just can't deal with the fact that bad things happen, And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I've never had that thought before, that I'm a coward. The pyramid scheme, as I mentioned several times, especially if you go listen to my episode on politics, a very important episode in season 1. It's a long episode, but it really will slowly engineer in your brain how a pyramid comes to be. It's not a cabal. It becomes a cabal later on. But it's all serendipitous and it's very organic. Pyramids are organic. Mountains look like pyramids. They're organic. And the way it happens is that some people get there first. Some people get there first, and someone has to centralize thought processes for a large group of people. And even if they are moral and they care about the people for thousands of years, eventually, what will end up happening is that because they're privy to everything that's going on in the universe, they gain more than you do because they know about all the opportunities. In my episode about politics, what I do is I go through the scenario of a bunch of people kind of like lost. They crash on an island and they have to rebuild society, and for whatever reason they can't escape. And so they combine all their knowledge, and it's a fairly large island like Oahu. And so then you've got folks that take care of the coasts, and they fish, and they bring food into the people right away because that's the easiest food supply. And then a tougher group of folks figure out agriculture, and they go inward, and they start creating crops internally. They may even start harvesting animals internally into the internals of the island. And so you have a group of people that need things that are agriculturally based. Some people are livestock based, and some people are fishing based. At a minimum, those 3 different groups of people. Well, someone needs to listen to all 3 groups and correlate their needs. And you're not going to have time, if you're on the east side of the island, to communicate with the west side of the island. Maybe the fish on the east are a lot more plentiful than the fish on the west. And it gets really complicated really fast. And so you need folks at the top that say, okay, here's the thing. West Coast people, you're not listening to the East Coast people because you can't leave what you're doing and go over and listen to them and still maintain your food supply, right? You need to keep doing what you're doing. It's just like when Castro took the entire country and tried to harvest, 10 million tons of sugarcane. He brought the entire economy of the country down to a screeching halt because no one was paying any of their other bills. Because a bartender wasn't a bartender, he was cutting down sugarcane. So you have this centralized body that says, okay, we need to get the more fish delivered to the east because the west is more plentiful. Well, immediately the people in the West, they understand it for the first meeting, but a couple of years later, decade later, 20 years later, the kids don't know that's the problem. So they're like, why is everyone taking our fish? The people at the top, well, what if there's a profit margin in some of that? A legitimate profit margin. And here they get to scoop up the profits, right? But eventually it gets out of control. Eventually some greedy generation comes through and they're born into it and they believe that they are entitled to the rewards of being at the top. Perhaps they start looking down on other people. Perhaps by being more intellectually engaged with the 3 different regions of production in their island, they are smarter. They understand more about everything else. They go down and talk to the fisherman that only throws a net out and grabs fish, and they're like, wow, they're really not that smart. They don't know what I know, and therefore I'm smarter than they are. So see how easy that is to lose control over control? I'm not sure how to maintain balance, quite frankly, in those scenarios. I don't know. But we got to try. We have to reset every once in a while. Again, the Sumerians, if you read all the Sumerian text from way back in the day, you will run into a story arc that happens once every so many years. And I forgot if it's a few hundred years or 1,000 years or whatever the case might be. But they would talk about how the fact that their leaders would rise up and really care about the people. And then eventually those leaders would get out of control and go through that greed model that I'm talking about. And what's fascinating about their story is they said someone came down from the hills, a foreign agency came down from the hills and reset the political structure of Sumeria, got rid of the leaders that were there, appointed new leaders, re-established the standards of people and what they're responsible for doing, and then they would leave and it would be prosperous for several hundred years after that reset. But this reset is documented at least 2 or 3 times. Now, for those of you who believe in alien intervention, that's an interesting story. For those of you who believe in flat Earth, that's a very interesting story. You keep the petri dish balanced for the inception of man, and once man can sort of maintain itself, we don't get visits anymore, right? Something like that. A little good conspiracy for you there. Your homework is to figure out where you are in the spectrum. Are you extreme official story? Or are you extreme anarchy? Do you feel comfortable with where you are in that spectrum? Do you want to be more center? Should you know the thought processes of all the spectrums? And I would suggest, yes, you should know what the left, most conservative thinking minds think. And you should know what people think on the extreme anarchy side. And then you should find out whether or not, you want to be in the direct center anarchy, center official story. This fake news thing has actually been very interesting and healthy for us. I think that when there were very few news organizations, probably like the 4 big ones on network news, right? One could establish a fairly reliable lifestyle. You could say, well, the information I'm getting is more right than it is wrong. And then the internet came around, and it was actually fairly interesting when YouTube launched and when search engines launched. You had all these interesting groups of people that have been trying to leak the truth for a very long time. And boy, there was a full spectrum from UFOs, landing to aliens living underneath the earth to conspiracies of all sorts of government types, banking types. And it was pretty raw because the disinformation campaigns hadn't started in full swing. Now, in 2016, we saw fake news go into overdrive, right? And it's so ironic. The whole thing is just pure irony that you would have a ton of absolutely fake news organizations come out where nothing they've ever reported is true. And then you have folks that are really trying to put out the truth, but they don't exactly know what the truth is. And so they try. I'm probably stuck in that category as well. One of our listeners, Richie, he made a good point to me in chat. He said, I just realized that I've been listening to your show for about 1.5 years, and he goes, I've generally consumed all of your episodes, and he goes, I just realized, he goes, that I'm sort of allowing myself to be indoctrinated by you. He goes, I'm not saying it's bad, but he goes, I'm realizing that by taking in your words, and I guess he's trying to suggest enjoying them, it's the only reason why you come back, right? That he goes, if you're off on any of your thoughts, then I'm off by the same degree because I'm accepting what you're saying. And I just want to say that I absolutely acknowledge that that's scientifically the truth, that that's what would be happening here, and that I take that extremely serious, and I've taken that extremely serious, and it's sort of why I created this show and branched out of my other show, MK Ultra Radio. It is my attempt at all times to put in qualifiers where I'm trying to speak from my own opinion. I think that most of you realize, including Richie, you realize that it is my opinion. It's just one guy talking in the backyard, right? I by no means want to sway you, in any way that you don't feel comfortable with. My whole shtick is to say, I want you to evaluate what I'm saying and put your own spin on it. I don't expect anyone to go away from an episode and be converted to my opinion. I don't have any ego like that, It was actually interesting. I'm finishing up, as well as you guys probably, some of you might have guessed this. Netflix came out with a kind of a mini-series lambasting Fidel Castro, because it's obviously, it's been greenlit because Fidel died. It's been greenlit because the controversy of whether or not to let Castro / Cuba, to allow them off the hook for his dealings with the United States, with the Soviet Union. And so the documentary is actually very interesting. It's multi-series, like 8 episodes. It's pretty amazing because they let people talk in their own native language, and you have to read it. It's subtitled in a lot of ways. The core narrator is in English, but they have a couple German historians, a couple French historians, lots of Cubans in and around. Both people that fought with Castro during his revolution. It's really, actually, I have to say, I finally understood who the hell Shea was. But one of the last episodes I'm working on is working on episode 7, I think, at this point. And someone said that one of Fidel Castro's main objectives when meeting an individual was to win them over as to how intelligent he was, and he wanted them to as it was described, subjugate anyone around him to him. And that he wanted them to think that he was really brilliant, that not only was he sort of a problem solver, but he had this amazing ability to memorize and regurgitate information. And it sort of hit me like a ton of bricks. I was thinking, oh, geez, that's sort of, it's not my objective with this show by any means. I think you guys know that, but, I make these shows. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of, hopefully scientific thought in a lot of areas. I'm obviously pretty equipped to memorize things that I find interesting and regurgitate them. But I think that you guys know what it's like to watch a show where someone is really massaging their ego and trying to build a brand around their ego. They say their names in their shows. Their shows are named after them personally, first name, last name, all that kind of stuff. I could care less. If I don't have any desire for, you to remember me by name by any means. Just if you dig this show, you dig it, and that's it. If it helps you think out your own thoughts, and again, if you disagree, I feel like I've succeeded if you disagree. Because that just means that you've visited your thoughts, you've visited your beliefs, and that's important to me. And hey man, I get converted all the time by people. It could be small things where people say, well, I used to think this, but now I think this. And I'll be like, whoa, I still think your old thoughts. Why did you change? And they'll explain it to me step by step. When that happens to me, I try to rush out and make an episode, right? Your comments on this show are probably the number one artery that I allow in my life to sway my opinion, to help refine my opinion. Either, again, disagreeing with me is one thing that could be really valuable for you, but the other one could be if we agree. If we agree then what's valuable is you've affirmed your current belief systems. Someone else thinks that what you've thought, they've had the same experience that you've had. I have a group of listeners that they contact me and they say, I don't really have any interest in your UFO stuff, any of your scientific things. I really like when you talk about things like patience, betrayal, things that are more neural, or I should say more cerebral and related to the condition of life that no one really talks about, because we all struggle with these things. And, it's either going to go off to some shrink or you're going to go off to some self-help me course. And those are pretty formulaic because they're trying to, have a one-size-fits-all medium. Plus, some of these subject matters are a little frustrating to think about. And so I try to keep it real. That's why I allow swearing on my show. But here's to finish off this episode, let's put it that way. Here's one of the things I believe. To think original thoughts, you do not have to accomplish the original thought within the paradigm that you think you need to upgrade your thinking. And what I mean by that is this. Let's just say that you wished that you would think a little bit differently about politics or something. That's just an example. And for whatever reason, there's no one in there really saying anything controversial or eye-opening about politics. And so you struggle. But I might say something about dreams that make you think a little bit differently. The episode on existentialism maybe makes you think a little bit different about how you own your reality, how much you've been conditioned to think you don't have any power in your reality, etc., etc. So if I can maybe touch you in a way that you think a little bit differently about something completely benign, what that does is that allows you to it builds a mechanism in your brain to discern information differently. One of the greatest areas that I've noticed people thinking differently and getting paid a lot of money to do it is in design. My very good friend Sid Mead, he's been a movie designer, futurist designer, car designer, TV design. I mean, he's worked for every major company up until he really took off in the film industry. But he's constantly hired to design boats, to design the interior of planes, all this crazy stuff. And this guy has never had a problem thinking differently, and I don't know why. I think he maybe never got indoctrinated, by the system as much as the rest of us. And because of him, I have been around a lot of fans that come to his house during various gatherings, and they'll bring their portfolios in from these amazing schools, and they're trying to show him how they think differently and how they're able to industrialize that difference in thinking to earn money and have fun with life. And I'll tell you one of the just weird serendipitous things, and then I'll shut up, is car design. Car design is fascinating. And it's fascinating for one huge reason. And if you just sit down with a sketch pad and try to design a new car, depending on what kind of person you are, you'll find out what I'm saying is very, very true if you're like me. Which is that because we have grown up with cars around us our entire lives. And again, some people look at cars in great detail. They look at every fender bend. They look at how frames are built, how engines are placed in the car, seating is placed in the car, all that kind of stuff. They have a little bit of a reprieve from the difficulty I'm talking about here. But because we think about cars having 4 tires, 2 to 4 doors, the appropriate interior to match those doors, we either think of engines being in the front, engines being in the back. Some people know about mid-engine cars, all that kind of stuff. We tend to start drawing new vehicles based on, well, it's got to have this. It's got to have that. And Sid will come in and he'll design things completely atypical. But it's not silly. As Gene Winfield said, his stuff isn't silly. You can actually build anything that Sid designs. As futuristic of a spaceship it might be, the spinners in Blade Runner, the cop cars, you could build it. As long as you had the propulsion systems that he's designated in his designs, it'll completely work. And it's functional. It's functional on a human level. It's functional on on a utilitarian level if it is a cop car. It's got the right mechanisms to enforce the law, etc., right? So as sort of a symbolic metaphor towards your thinking process, car design is fantastic. When you think about redesigning a government, how many people in America, if they hadn't watched this show or been a little expanded by other shows or just have a good mind, I think most people would redesign America if you could, and you'd immediately start with the left and right party, conservative and liberal party. You would start it off with the divide that is destroying our country. And the thing is you would have our government model to jump off of and say, well, a bunch of smart people built this country. They must have known what they were talking about. So this divide is necessary. Well, every country in Europe has the same thing. Sometimes they call the Conservative Party a Labor Party. But it's always based on a divide. So the initial kernel of thought may not be the best thought you can have. Sometimes it's better to think of it from a clean slate, right? That guy that invented the Dyson vacuum cleaner, think about that dude. I think he's a German guy. But he came in and he said, what's the part that sucks about a vacuum cleaner? Pardon the pun. He said, look, the bag is the biggest pain in the ass. But why was the bag invented? The bag was invented to sell bags. Right? So he said, that's the part I'm going to get rid of right away. And he said, all the ducting and stuff that makes a bag is exactly what cuts down on the suction of a vacuum cleaner. What's the old man that does he still does a bag one? I think it's the Noric or something, the one that picks up a bowling ball. Don't tell that guy. But the Dyson, well, it just has a little container. And once the Dyson came out, everyone copied the Dyson. I haven't had a vacuum cleaner with a bag in it for 15 years because of that guy. Because he thought differently. He changed the entire game. Think about Steve Jobs and the gang that redesigned iPods, redesigned telephones, took the Star Trek tablet and actually made it a reality. Someone in Star Trek thought about a pad. Hey, this is what we want, right? A clipboard that has a computer in it. How many things are like that? Cars no longer have keys that you put into ignitions and turn. They're proximity keys. Wow, that's convenient, I now get in my car and I have my keys in my pocket, so I don't have to worry about leaving them behind. As long as I'm by my car with my keys in my pocket, my car is going to start. My car will unlock the doors. Pretty cool, right? We want to be like these people, re-engineering things from the bottom up based on our requirements and needs today. And, I think that one thing that people have done for years is look at what frustrates them. What part is broken? Well, those are the parts you need to fix. Those are where you need to laser in on what's going wrong in the world. When I ask the question, what law or statute has your government passed to make your life better? That's where I start to look at, okay, there's two people running for president. One isn't saying jack shit besides be offended. The other one said, I want to make changes in these very specific places which yield prosperity. His whole campaign was about substance. This is what sucks about the world. This is what needs to change. I'm going to tell you right now, this is no mystery to any one of you, that we aren't mature enough as a society and we aren't awake enough as a society to centralize power in this world. We're not ready for a UN. We're not. We're not ready for that. We can't do it. It's already a massively corrupt organization. They get faxes in the morning or emails in the morning telling them how to vote. No one's allowed to think for themselves. Go watch the movie Rollerball from 1975 and you will see what the world will be like if corporations get their way and take over the world. There won't be monarchs, they'll just be executives. And honestly, they'll wield more power as executives than they ever wielded as monarchs. Be careful. But again, the name of the game is not to wait till everything's broken. The name of the game is to fix everything at the mental coup level. to simply look at our standards of living. I have my episode on morality, which everyone seems to really enjoy. And again, you can deviate from moral compasses, as they say, but it's the deviations that go unchecked that are the most dangerous. Like I said in that episode, pornography really became a product in the 70s in America. I don't know about Europe. And it was one of these things where adults would sit together and go, well, we have the right to watch other people make love, quote unquote, while we're making love and the whole room is love, love, love. And of course, the hippie movement really genericized the overall meaning of that. And it just went unchecked. And it has grown to the point in 2016 that if you're a parent, it's probably horrifying to most parents, regardless of how, educated you are, to think that your children can, if they have an access to a cell phone, computer, they can look up anything on the web. Look up unbelievable deviant behaviors on the web and become curious about them and addicted to them and want to try them, breaking down their ability to enjoy life on a genuine level. And here's the difference. I know I'm meandering. I apologize. I really hate editing these really long videos. I'm trying to make these things an hour, but I'm failing miserably. When you watch Star Wars, for instance, it's a fantasy. You see Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia, and they're conquering the universe, Han Solo. You identify with one of those characters, no matter what. Either you think you're Han Solo, or you think you're Luke, or Leia, or whatever. Some of you might think you're Darth Vader. But in the end, when the credits roll, you disengage from that fantasy and you go home, and maybe you dream about it a little bit, and you want to buy a few Star Wars toys or a couple costumes so you can cosplay and roleplay, all that kind of stuff at home. But in the end, it's not going to become who you are as a human being necessarily, unless you take the Rebel Alliance and start to live for, fighting injustice or whatever. But think about pornographic material. It's so close to home. It's so close to home that you pollute your own mind about what other people want to actually do in bed. And you get all messed up. I let that stuff screw me up in my 20s, And, the funny thing for me is that I've been down that line for, so many decades. I guess maybe a decade, really. That now doesn't really do anything for me at all. I know it's fantasy. I know it's disruptive to my quality of life. No one wants to talk about it, right? I've actually debated doing a whole episode on pornography, but I don't know if I got an hour of that stuff. But my morality episode is sort of my take on that. But being indoctrinated is sort of the anti-force to the mental coup. I think that religion can be wonderful and religion can be ultra dangerous. And I think that the world is starting to understand that. People are a little less assertive about what they believe, or at least the benefits for the whole world. People in Christianity are now a little less hubris about this is the only way you can get to God, and I'm so sure of myself. It's pretty hard to wake up in this world and realize that whatever religion you're in, not the whole world as a whole doesn't believe what you believe. Now, if you're Muslim, that's, from what I understand, the biggest religion in the world. And again, it's not the infidel version of it, but talk about a gateway drug. I mean, imagine there was a group of Christians who were very peaceful, and they were 98% of all the Christians on earth, which is about, 8% of the world. But there was this little sect, and they're in Topeka, Kansas, unfortunately. There's a little sect of Christians that believe that it's more infidel if you're black, or put it this way, if you're not white, you're not invited to the game. If you have any deviation in your sexual orientation, you're not invited to the game. In fact, you should be murdered and killed. If you ever engage in war for any reason whatsoever, they should spit on your grave. Well, what are the odds that if you were Muslim that you would translate that over to the more crazy Christian. It's not going to happen because it's such a gigantic paradigm shift to the crazy side. What if you're already Muslim, but you're peaceful, and all of a sudden, various organizations in the world that like chaos, they are exacerbating and growing this infidel side of the Muslim religion. Well, converting to that may not be as hard as you think, which is why it's dangerous. Which is why any belief system that isn't your own, that is manufactured from the ground up, and has sort of the common law, do no harm theme to it, is dangerous. Now, you can easily understand the infidel passage where someone says, I'm going to go kill people. But what other tiny ones are dangerous? What tiny thought processes are dangerous? Well, believing in debt's pretty goddamn dangerous, wouldn't you say? Worshipping porn is probably pretty dangerous, wouldn't you say? Being racist is pretty dangerous, wouldn't you say? This is why we have to be careful. You must own your own thoughts, people. And what's really sort of humorous about it is that I have to say it. You have to say it. You have to say it to yourself, and if anyone's really coming up with some serious indoctrination, you have to tell them too. Are those your thoughts, or are they someone else's thoughts? We take other people's thoughts because we're cowards, typically. Or we're tired, or it's just a void. When you're really, really young, you take other people's thoughts because it's just a void of knowledge. Truth predicts the future, right? Truth feels good. Truth lasts forever. Lies are temporary. Lies have expiration dates on them, right? I think you feel me. I'm going to shut up now. For those of you who've really hung on throughout all these episodes, man, again, like I say every once in a while, you deserve a trophy. So I appreciate you joining. If you dig the series, please subscribe. If you like this particular episode, please give me a thumbs up. For anyone who makes it to the end, wow, hats off to you. Thanks for listening to another human being ramble on. For the record, I want you to have your own thoughts. That's what this episode's about. Just take me as a grain of salt. I do my best to steer you in positive directions, at least original directions, right? Definitely interested in more episode suggestions. I got quite a few in the queue, so I'm just slowly editing them. Been pretty busy. So I do have my moon evidence episode, which I'm trying to get out the door. I'm just trying to find the best visual examples and photographs to kind of certify what I was claiming so that you guys can see it 100%. But anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.